Welcome to our 8th video in our series, Characters of Faith, where we look at a biblical character and how they live their lives and how we can learn how to follow Jesus in our own way by looking at their lives. Today, we get to look at a character that's in Matthew's Gospel, listed in the forerunners of Jesus, listed as one of Jesus's ancestors. But she's not only in that list, she's also in the list in Hebrews, where the writer of the Hebrews commends people for by faith their actions. And so today we're going to look at someone who is slightly remarkable and someone who you wouldn't have expected in either of those lists. That person is Rahab. So we pick up the story in Joshua chapter 2. The people of God have been wandering around the desert for 40 years, being provided for by God and learning together. They'd already escaped from Egypt, and now they were camped by the river Jordan waiting to cross. And what Joshua did was he sent out several spies to go and spy out the land, and he wanted them particularly to check out Jericho. And so 2 of the spies went into Jericho. But the king of Jericho realized they were there, so the spies went to go and hide. And they hid in the house of Rahab, a prostitute, the kind of classic place where 2 spies might want to go, 2 foreigners. And when they were there, Rahab decided to hide them. And the king's servants knocked on the door and said, "We saw 2 people come in. Will you let them out to us?" But because Rahab had hidden them, she sent the king's servants on their way. She sent them off to go and look, and then the town gates were shut. And so Rahab then goes to talk to the spies on the roof. And we pick up in Joshua 2, verse 8. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up on the roof and said to them, "I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death." Rahab had taken a risk. She'd taken a deep, deep risk because of her fear of God. She'd heard rumors of what God could do and how God was in charge. And so she took a deep risk. She'd sent the king's servants on the way and hid the spies. And so now in this conversation, she says, "Come on, guys, I've saved you. Will you please help me and my family be saved?" And this conversation begins, and the spies agree. They agree that they will save Rahab and her family. And they talk about a sign. And it's a really simple sign. It's a sign of a scarlet cord. And the scarlet cord is let out of the window for the spies to climb down and to run away. And the scarlet cord was going to be left there for when Jericho was invaded, that the people of God would be able to rescue Rahab and her family. I wonder what it's like when you suddenly trust God beyond anything else, when you hope and you wait in the face of fear that others have, in that kind of face of what's coming next. But Rahab and her family were trusting. We're trusting in God, we're trusting in his victory, and trusting in the sign that they placed outside their window, the sign of the scarlet cord. And so we pick up the story now in Joshua chapter 6. So in Joshua 6, we get the fact that the people of God have already miraculously crossed the river Jordan, and they've been marching around the town for many days, for 7 days. And this was the last day, and they were about to attack the town. And we pick up in verse 17. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house shall be spared, because she hid the spies we sent. That was Joshua's command. And so, as Joshua commanded, so as everybody walked round, they blew the trumpets, the walls fell down, and everybody charged in. And Joshua commanded the two spies this in verse 22. Joshua said to the two men who'd spied out the land, "Go into the prostitute's house and bring her out and all who belong to her, in accordance with your oath to her." So the young men who had done the spying went in and brought out Rahab, her father and mother, her brothers and sisters, and all who belonged to her. They brought out her entire family and put them in a place outside the camp of Israel. Imagine this. Rahab had been waiting with her family. She gathered them together, and they were there in fear in case her own people turned on her. She let the scarlet cord down, and the spies came in and rescued her and the family. But what was her future to be? This part of the reading leaves her outside of the camp, outside of Israel. What provision is there going to be? So we pick up the story one verse later in verse 25. But Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute with her family and all who belonged to her, because she hid the men Joshua had sent as spies to Jericho, and she lives among the Israelites to this day. Instead of being outside of the camp of Israel, she's now been brought in and looked after. She's now part of the people of God. The ultimate outsider who had recognized the power of God, who'd supported the people of God, who trusted the people of God and trusted their God. And she and her family had been saved. And it's amazing that they were saved because they put the sign of the red cord. And the red crimson cord is exactly the same color as the blood of Jesus. The blood of Jesus that saves us. And so in Rahab's salvation, we see the salvation of Jesus. But even more than that, when we look in Matthew and we look in the genealogy of Jesus, Rahab is included there along with Ruth. And Rahab is included there because if Rahab wasn't there, Jesus wouldn't have been born. And so we see all the way back then that outsiders were included. Those who trusted God could become a part of the people of God. Just look at that in Matthew's Gospel. Matthew chapter 1, verse 5. Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Boaz, the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Obed, the father of Jesse. And David was Jesse's son. If Rahab wasn't there, the line of Jesus wouldn't have been there. Her faithfulness was rewarded. Her trust was rewarded. Her risking and giving it up was rewarded. Giving up everything meant that she got a place in the people of God. In Jesus' own teaching, it was very, very clear. Those who give up for me will be rewarded many, many, many times. When we choose to trust God and put our faith in God, we will be rewarded many times, sometimes where we won't even know it. For Rahab was many, many years before Jesus. But Rahab was one of these ladies who was commended. It wasn't just the Abrahams and the Isaacs of this world. It wasn't just the big heroes of faith. Rahab actually has a verse dedicated to her in the book of Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 30. By faith the walls of Jericho fell after the army had marched around them for 7 days. By faith the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were unbelieving. The reality is, because she trusted and had faith, she had life. And the crimson cord reminds us of the blood of Jesus. And James also commends her actions as actions of faith in James chapter 2, verse 25. In the same way, was not even Rahab the prostitute considered righteous for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them off in a different direction? As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. Rahab's life reminds us simple and clearly that if we have faith, we act upon that faith. Rahab's actions released faith. Rahab's actions released blessing. If you and I want to follow Jesus, we need to be like Rahab and trust wholeheartedly in him, trust wholeheartedly in his deliverance, and act upon that faith, because that demonstrates all that God is doing in and through us, and that we see that faith is alive with action. That is Rahab's faith. That is our faith. So how might you fully trust Jesus in this week? Where is the moment that you might trust him, that your faith might come alive, and it might bring blessing and salvation and the message of Jesus, maybe for even generations to come after we've been born, just like Rahab?